This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Lauren Hersey.
Hi, Jim. Hope you're feeling better today.
January is a joy. But I'm feeling better.
Good. And I'm sure you are not alone. Well, we do have some exciting things to cover today. We are going to be talking about Disneyland Resort and their big 70 year anniversary. It's coming up this year. And we're going to be talking about the new Haunted Mansion gift shop that finally just opened at Disneyland. And today in the feature, Jim is going to be diving into the history of the Haunted Mansion merchandise and how it went from a single cart to the fan favorite it is today. But before we get into all that fun, I think we should take a moment and thank our sponsor.
That we should. And this episode of I Want That Too is brought to you by our friends at Be Our Guest Vacation. Planning your next Disney getaway? Let me tell you, these folks are the real deal. Be Our Guest Vacations is a platinum-level earmarked travel agency, which means that Disney itself recognizes them as one of the best in the business. Their team of expert agents offers concierge-level service to take the stress out of planning, so all you have to do is show up and enjoy the magic. And they don't just handle Disney either, whether it's Universal, cruises, or adventures around the globe, they've got you covered. And the best part? Their services are completely free. Yep, you heard that right. World-class planning for no extra cost. So, if you plan on making your next vacation unforgettable, head on over to beourguestvacations.com and let them take care of the details. Okay, so Disneyland's 70th. Really?
Yeah, we're talking about it already. I mean, the celebration is kind of officially here, kind of, I guess, because it is happening in 2025. And, it got me thinking about it because we did get a sneak peek of some of what was coming to the theme parks when we were out at D23 this summer. But the official anniversary date, just so you know, is May 16th, and these festivities are going to run all the way through the summer of 2026. And I mean, we're talking about it now because I don't know if you and Nancy are already, sitting around doing your annual travel planning. Like I know we are, but this is the time to make the decisions. Like, should you, shouldn't you? So, did you see anything about the 70th yet? Maybe like the new theming?
I have seen the ad campaign, which, again, is intriguing because, again, you have to remember that Disneyland is the world's most famous regional theme park. So the idea is you sort of do this thing where you're shooting for folks who 70% of the people who go to Disneyland come from 100 miles away. But you do also want that 30% who will travel in from out of town, especially for a significant anniversary date like this, the 70th. But anyway, speaking of which, so normally they have a theme, something to get people excited to come out to the park. I mean, don't get me wrong, 70th anniversary, big deal. But okay, so what's the theme for this celebration?
All right, so before I tell you what the theme is, do you remember what I told you a couple episodes ago at my time at the Disney Institute, like what Disney's mantra is?
Did I mention I'm hopped up on cold medicine? I'm having trouble remembering where I put the car keys, but remind me.
Okay, so Disney's mission is to create happiness. And so when you're going through the traditions course, that's how it starts. Is we're they're here to create happiness. So to me, it was no surprise that the theme for the 70th anniversary celebration is actually just celebrate happy. And they're going all in on this theme because, I mean, for real, like, who doesn't want to be happy? And I mean, it's such a big, like, deal. They're getting their own, I'm calling it a theme song that is also entitled Celebrate Happy, which I cannot wait for.
Okay, I mean this in the kindest possible way. Happy's a dwarf.
Yeah.
And the thing, the dwarf at Disney, wouldn't it be funny if somebody at Disney corporate actually had a sense of humor and had Happy show up at the park and, "Oh, you're celebrating me. Oh, this is so nice. A big party." And it's like, well, no, it's the 70th anniversary. I'm really sorry. And hope your movie does well when it comes out in theaters, the live action version.
I mean, there is a tie-in, and then Happy walks away and he's sad because it's not for him.
It's not for him. Just celebrate Happy. That's like, okay. The English major in me is having trouble with this, but okay. But again, that said, you know what makes me happy about Celebrate Happy? They're bringing back Paint the Night.
Yay! And I have actually never seen it except for I've watched it on YouTube about 100 times. So I'm pumped for that. But that's not the only nighttime festivity that's happening. Did you see that they're going to have a new version of World of Color at Disney's California Adventure? And it's also World of Color Celebrate Happy is the theme. Did you see that?
I did not. But I always enjoy a new World of Color, a new show out there on Paradise Lagoon. Now, mind you, I never know where to stand to watch these things, because if I'm down close, I then look like I've swum the English Channel, and if I'm far back, I see the back of people's heads. But I do like these shows.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a very tough one to find a spot. Like, when we were out there in the fall, like, we literally walked up to a cast member who, they're not as friendly in California as they are in Florida. And we're like, excuse me, we're Disney World people. Like, we have annual passes, the whole 9 yards, but we have no idea what to do with this. And this nice lady, she kindly escorted us into maybe some type of like VIP preview. I don't know what it was. And so we actually got to watch it for the very, very first time in the primo spot. Now, when Eric and I were back out with you at D23, we popped over to see it before heading home. And we did not have a good spot. Like, we were so far back you couldn't see. But the ironic tie here is that, with the World of Color and the new Celebrate Happy theme, that it's featuring like joy and sadness and all the like characters from Inside Out, like Inside Out 2, which, with the success, I mean, that was a huge movie, right?
Oh, I want to say, as finishing out the year, it was the top earner worldwide. So yeah, I mean, this is a good choice. That said, though, have I ever told you about attending the premiere of the very first edition of World of Color at California Adventure? Okay.
No. Tell me, sir.
All right. So again, I was working for the Huffington Post at the time, so I had a primo seat down front. In fact, I want to say I had a view of all the people who were let in, and for example, Dick Sherman, Disney legend Dick Sherman, and dang, I am blanking her name from Desperate Housewives.
Like Eva Longoria?
No. The one who did all the work on Broadway. All right. Well, anyway, because this is going to be an embarrassing story for that actress, we won't use her name. All right. So basically, what you need to understand about World of Color is that it happens at 9 o'clock at night. It's got to be dark enough for this to happen. And when they held the premiere of World of Color, there's this thing in Southern California called the marine layer. That the notion is that at a certain time of night, when the temperature drops in a certain to a certain level, the air changes direction suddenly. All right. So, for example, wind that would be traveling in a southwestern direction will actually reverse course. All right. And so this actually happened a minute before the show began. All right.
Okay.
So, and this is a computer controlled show, and for this entire time, the anemometers around the perimeter of where the performance space are going, okay, the wind is blowing in this direction. It's moving at this speed. It's safe to put the columns 100 feet high. All right. But here's the thing. The show launches, the wind shifts. And now when the 100-foot columns of water come down, they don't land in the lagoon. They land on the celebrities.
Oh
All
my
right.
gosh.
All right. So, and more to the point, all of the lovely graphics which are being presented on the mist screens, because the mist screens have now shifted 5 to 10 feet inboard because the wind has changed direction. The entire audience is leaning forward and squinting, like, is that goofy? Are those flowers? What am I looking at? All right. Okay. The show ends. The lights come up. And again, we're all sitting there and look down at the celebrities. And first of all, the Desperate Housewives star had come in wearing a very teeny tiny dress that had basically been torn off of her by the columns of water. So you've got your Disney plaids frantically scrambling for coats to cover this poor woman up because her dress has been destroyed by the water coming down. But my favorite moment, and poor Dick Sherman also down front, and Dick, a lovely, talented man, wrote some of the greatest Disney music of all time. However, had the worst comb over in Hollywood history. All right. And the water had come down and basically moved the piece of hair that covered his bald spot, so now everyone could finally see Dick was bald. But the kicker, the absolute kicker, John Lasseter, who, I'm going to be polite here, had been overserved prior to the start of the show. He is dying laughing because he is now repeating to everyone around him in the VIP setting of the show the warning that they played before the lights went down. You may get wet. You may get wet. And yet he's just, he's just like, you may get wet. I'm just saying, you may. We'll not forget that night.
And you might lose your hair or your dress. They should have added that to the disclaimer.
There we go. But
at least he was there lightening the mood.
there he was. That he was. So
that's a great story. Like, listen, that's what I love about this podcast is when you can just tell us stuff that we would not know otherwise. All right. So another thing that has me excited about the 70th anniversary that I'm dying to get your thoughts on is the Walt Disney animatronic that is coming in May. Sir, do you have thoughts?
I have very mixed emotions about this, largely because the Disney family itself, for a long time, discouraged this sort of idea. Now, mind you, for example, Diane Disney Miller was still alive when Saving Mr. Banks came out in theaters, and she supposedly loved what Tom Hanks did with her dad in that movie. And this is the thing, over my 40 plus years as an entertainment writer, Lauren, I have interviewed a lot of folks who spent time with Walt, were in the room with the real Walt Disney. And it's one of these things where I just worry that, I want them to do right by the guy. He was a complicated guy who created a lot of stuff that makes a lot of people happy even today. And I mean this in the kindest possible way. If you've seen the last couple of presidents they put in the Hall of Presidents,
yeah,
the likenesses have not been great. And I don't necessarily want a bad looking Walt. But at the same time, obviously, this is the 70th anniversary of Disneyland. They really want to do right by the guy. It's kind of interesting to me that, for example, they're doing this brand new show in rotation with Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. So
Yes.
I guess what I'm saying here is I should honestly shut up and wait to see what the actual show is like. I mean, it's okay to have reservations and to voice them, but let's give them a chance. Let's see what they can do here. That said, given how the Disney company spent much of the 1970s erasing or finding every photo with Walt with the cigarette in his hand.
Yes.
First of all, the real Walt, if he were up there on stage, would have just finished smoking or was about to smoke. So I hope at least to acknowledge that they have an ashtray up there on stage.
Yeah, like I just think like so that you remember in Philadelphia where they had like the hologram of Walt, and then the statue in Epcot, like at Dreamers Point, that's in World Celebration, when it was unveiled, he kind of looks like he's on the toilet. You know which one I'm talking about. And I'm like, I don't know. Can we like leave the poor man alone and like just celebrate his legacy? But maybe we'll both be surprised.
I'm hoping.
And maybe Garner Holt had something to do with it. And I mean, like, you know, we're talking about Haunted Mansion coming up next. And we saw what he did with the Haunted Mansion holiday animatronic. So I don't know. Maybe we give him a call and see if he had anything to do with it. And I'd have a little more faith, I think. But we shall see.
We shall see. But again, this is a merch podcast. So, and we're talking about the 70th anniversary. So what do we think of the 70th merch?
Okay, so we don't know a ton about it, to be honest. Now, you and I, know more about it than probably the average person because the initial line was unveiled during D23 over the summer. Do you remember?
I do. And it wasn't, I'm trying to be positive and polite here. Interesting choices. Is that the way to say it?
Yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, I would definitely say interesting choices for such a big anniversary. So they're leaning into the vintage, vibe. That's something that kind of stands out to me. It's like oddly vintage and that like ultra modern, like a lot of white space, like the Mickey Mouse logo, just to give you some color context here. It's Mickey Mouse and half of his face is teal and half of his face is lime green. So it's kind of an odd choice. I'll say that.
Okay. But I also say this is somebody who lived through the 80s and they beat us to death with teal during that decade. But yeah, but it's the stuff we love from the parks. It's the Spirit jerseys all the way down to collectible pins, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's all the things. There was a cool baseball jersey. The Spirit jersey it's okay. Like it's all okay. But what I'm hoping is, remember, I think it was our last show, 2 shows ago, when we were talking about like the dated 2025 merch. And I was like, Jim, like it just oddly looks like they're celebrating something. And you were the one who reminded me of the big anniversary. So I'm hoping that there is that line of celebration as well. But, we shall see. There'll be more to come, I'm sure.
Okay, I agree. Well, all right. What else? What else do we have news-wise coming out of California?
Well, the biggest news that I'm excited about, and hopefully you'll give us some of the details here, is Madame Leota's Somewhere Beyond, the new Haunted Mansion gift shop, just opened, right?
Yeah. Now, what's kind of intriguing about this is they have built, again, Haunted Mansion has been open since 1969, August of 69, I want to say. And you exited the attraction, you came up through the crypt, and you walked back out toward the Rivers of America. And there had previously been a single merchandise cart, and we'll get to that story on the second half of the show. But now we have a purpose-built building right here, just steps away from the exit as you exit out of the crypt. It's actually designed to look like the carriage house associated with the mansion. And evidently the idea was that Madame Leota, when she was visiting the Gracie family and performing her seances, this is where she would stay while she was on property. And that's sort of the decor of the interior of the building.
Yeah, but this was a part of, like, I remember when they put the walls up, like, this was a part of a bigger announcement, right? Like, we weren't just getting the gift shop. Wasn't there, like, a purpose for them to do this outside of the bigger gift shop?
Well, I actually, it was sort of the bookends approach because, again, you had this post-show retail, which the California version has never had,
Right.
again, except for that cart. But they also did a significant amount of work on the queue space for this attraction, with the idea of actually expanding the queue. Which is a dual purpose effort. Well, what they were trying to do is get as many people off the streets who were trying to get into the Haunted Mansion behind sort of a wall. Because remember, we've had Tiana's Bayou Adventure just open in the side of the former Splash Mountain. And the anticipation was so many people would be headed that way anyway that there was going to be additional traffic issues. So why not take this moment to address the mansion's queue space? So they've expanded the outdoor queue there, but at the same time tried to sort of create some connective tissue between that space and the post-show retail.
I think it's odd. Like, I mean, I'm so glad they met their deadline, right? They said that they were going to have it open by the end of the year. Like, so when we were out in the summer, like, obviously the walls were still up and they had just opened the Haunted Mansion Holiday. But, like, that's Haunted Mansion Holiday is, like, getting ready, or it's already closed, right?
Interesting. Yeah. By the time this episode's posted, it will have finally closed for 2025. But again, you have to remember that Haunted Mansion Holiday is a going concern at Disney. And I want to say by August of next year, excuse me, I'm sorry. We're recording in 2024, folks, the last moments. So I have to reset my interior calendar. Yes, that Disneyland will be back in the Haunted Mansion holiday business August, September of this year. Bigger, better, and more to the point, when you go into Somewhere Beyond, there will definitely be more new Haunted Mansion holiday merch in there.
Yeah, I think that it's like the store has like a mix of both, like the Haunted Mansion and then the Nightmare Before Christmas, which will be really cool, something totally different than what we're seeing at Disney World. And so, like, what's fascinating about the gift shop to me is, like, it's kind of, it seems like from seeing the pictures and the videos, a more immersive vibe. So I think the story is that she now has left her collection of artifacts behind for guests to find. So, like, when you go in, you see, like, the floating instruments and the candles and the crystal ball, where I think that she, like, you know, occasionally makes an appearance, like, makes her presence known, which, I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's really cool. The cast members get, like, new themed outfits. So it seems like they were going for, like, more immersive. Like, go big or go home, since we're talking from going from a cart to actually having a full-blown gift shop.
Well, the other thing to take into consideration here is Haunted Mansion fans, especially at Disneyland, are among the most passionate, dedicated fans. And so it's been kind of interesting to watch some of the comments online about Somewhere Beyond, because there have been some people quibbling about some of the stuff they're using in the upper shelves to decorate. I could buy that on Etsy or eBay. And it's just sort of like, when I hear somebody say that, I know it's just one of these things where it's like Disney's been doing this forever. All right. For example, the propping of Big Thunder Mountain Railway. I mean, Disney didn't build old mining equipment from the 1880s.
Right.
They actually went out to the desert and found abandoned mines and paid people like 10 cents a ton for scrap and hauled it back in and steam cleaned it and then set it up out there in Frontierland. I mean, it's just propping. The people who prop these things are professionals and shop for items. And, it's like, okay, that's up high. That doesn't have to be hyper detailed. That's down low. That's something we have to build custom. It's the old cliche that some people would complain if they were hung with a new rope. I feel like there are just some mansion fans who weren't going to be happy with this thing no matter what they did.
Right. And I mean, I think about Jim Scholl telling us that, he had to go across the world to source plants for attractions. I mean, they're paying attention to this stuff. So I don't know why you're right. I mean, you're always going to have people that aren't happy. From what I could see right now, I thought it was nicely done. So talking about this passionate community, I have to ask, because you are the inside guy, there's been some speculations about, different enhancements that could pop up, when they reopen on January 18th as the original version of the Haunted Mansion. Have you heard any rumblings?
Well, okay. Again, it is Disneyland's 70th anniversary. And if you ask, and you have to understand at this point, I want to say we're on our fourth, maybe fifth generation of Imagineers. And you ask these guys, what's your favorite attraction to the park? 90% of the guys will either say Pirates of the Caribbean or Haunted Mansion. And so if there's new technology, new innovative things that can be tried out, people invariably bring them over to the mansion. And I will say this much, is a couple of things I wouldn't mind seeing that are done at Walt Disney World go to Anaheim.
Like what? Tell us.
Have you ever been in the stretching room in Florida and heard the 3D audio in there, where you could hear literally the wood warping and the spirits flying around inside of the room? I mean, the weird little... Well, that hasn't traveled yet to California. And it's just one of the things where it's like, guys, that's low-hanging fruit. That's literally there, and it's a wonderful moment. It's not intrusive. That's the other thing, is that every time something new comes in, something old has to go out.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like, we love it for what it is, so just let it be. And while you're at it, the time and attention you're giving Haunted Mansion or Pirates, maybe Tomorrowland? I'm just saying.
Right? Just give us the People Mover back and quit messing with the Haunted Mansion.
There we go.
Just saying. Okay. Well, after the break, we're going to continue the Haunted Mansion conversation, and Jim is going to be telling us how we got from just that single cart to the massive phenomenon it is today. Like we talked about, everybody wanting to put their fingerprints on it. So stay.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
Tuned.
And we're back. Okay, so as Lauren teased, as we're headed to break, we're going to be talking about the Haunted Mansion and merch. But again, it's apologizing for pulling a James Michener here, but to tell this story about the brand new store that just opened up, you got to go back to original Disneyland, the park that opened in 1955.
But Haunted Mansion wasn't, right?
No, it was not. It was
Okay, it's
not.
my Disney
Okay.
trivia.
Okay, yeah, but interesting though, if you go back to the early plans for the park, there was in fact off of Main Street, USA. There was supposed to be a haunted house that was built there, that had a graveyard out front and that sort of thing. That didn't make it into the finished plans, but again, it was something front of mind, something that they were working on for a while. But what we're going to talk about now is how Disney did merch for Disneyland early on. And because you got to remember, because there had never been a Disneyland. So initially, if you look at the early Disneyland merchandise from 55, 56, 57, it's a lot of the castle. It's the castle on plates. It's the castle etched on glass. It's the castle on the front of a board game, the Fantasyland board game. And by the way, there was a Tomorrowland board game and a Frontierland board game. But again, the notion was Disneyland was special in and of itself. Don't get me wrong. There were things that celebrated individual attractions. Like, for example, you could buy a little steam-driven motor version of the Jungle Cruise boat, or there was a model you could make of the Moonliner, the rocket to the moon ride from Tomorrowland. But when it came to sponsoring or merchandise that celebrated individual attractions, Lauren, we really didn't get that. In fact, we didn't even get that in California first. We got that at the New York World's Fair in 1964. This was with the opening of It's a Small World, which, by the way, we'll do the Reader's Digest version. I love Small World because that ride only exists because somebody pissed off Walt Disney. Do you know the story at all?
I don't think I do, which I should because Eric's a World's Fair huge fan, but I don't. Tell me.
Okay. So Pepsi-Cola had agreed to sponsor the UNICEF attraction at the 1965-1964 World's Fair. And they had gone through 3 different designers, and all of them had delivered terrible ideas. Okay, so now it's May of 1963. There are 11 months left, and they don't have a pavilion. And so Joan Crawford, the actress, whatever became of Baby Jane, Joan Crawford, is, she's the wife of the head of the board of the Pepsi-Cola company. And she's like, well, that nice Walt Disney, I understand he's doing other people's pavilions for the fair. Why don't we ask him? And I know Walt. I've seen him at the Academy Award functions. I'll call him. And so she calls over to Disney Studios, and Walt isn't there that day, but they transfer Joan Crawford to Dick Irvine, who's in charge of Imagineering at that point. And Joan explains what she wants, and Dick very politely says, I am so sorry, Miss Crawford. UNICEF is a lovely organization, and of course, Pepsi-Cola is a sponsor of Disneyland. You're the Golden Horseshoe Review. We love working with you guys, but you're asking us to do this 11 months before the fair opens. There's just no way. And so Joan hangs up, and she's disappointed. But this is a Friday. Okay, so Monday, they have a staff meeting, and Walt is back now, and they're over at WED, and Dick is just going through the agenda, and offhandedly says to Walt, oh, by the way, Joan Crawford called on Friday, and she wanted to know if we'd want to do the Pepsi-Cola pavilion for the world, and I told her we were too busy, we'd already done too much for the fair, and then Dick looks up, and Walt is looking at him with his famous eyebrow up, sort of this withering stare, and it's like, oh, I screwed up. And Walt says, I'm the one who decides if we're too busy to do something. You get on the phone and tell Miss Crawford we would be happy to do her pavilion. And so 11 months from we'll do it to people walking into that building. Okay, so think about it. They barely have time to build the attraction, let alone have merch. All right, so it opens and people get off the ride and say, I love that song. Can I get a copy of that song? And it's like, well, no. But if you fill out this form and you send us $1, in 6 months, we'll send you a 33 LP of the Small World song. And also, people got off the ride and said, I love that. Is there a souvenir book? And said, well, no, not yet, because we literally just put it up last night. But, when you all go home, we'll take pictures and then we'll hire a company and print them. And those start becoming available in August. But this is the thing. Walt's back in California and is like, wow, they're really buying that record. They're really buying that book. Well, first of all, we should bring this thing back to California, and that's what they did in 1966 after the fair closed. May, it opens at Disneyland Park. But Walt is like, that is unusual. They want to learn more about the rides. And Walt's like, we should look at this more. But again, of course, Walt dies in December of 66. But then, the following May, 1967, Pirates of the Caribbean opens at the park. And suddenly, people are getting off this ride in New Orleans Square, and they're like, wow, that's a great ride. Do you guys have anything? I want to remember this. Is there a souvenir book or something? And the folks said, no, hang on. We did this for the 64 World's Fair. We know what to do now. And so that's when we get a Pirates of the Caribbean book. But again, this is early Disney theme park in regard to merchandise. So, for example, when you got off the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, you didn't exit through a gift shop in Anaheim. You actually went through Red's Arcade. I mean, you had an opportunity to throw a quarter into a machine, but that was pretty much it.
Is that where, the Blue Bayou is now, that restaurant?
Well, the restaurant was always there on the first floor. We're talking about the exit as you come out. You then re-enter New Orleans Square. And to Walt's way of thinking, I really want them shopping at the stores that are in New Orleans Square. I don't want them stopping in the exit to shop for merch. If anything, I got boatloads of people coming off, and we got to clear them out of there. Now, mind you, though, the folks who are working on Walt Disney World are hearing about these stories about people in California wanting Pirates merch. And so when they make the decision after the Magic Kingdom opens in 71 to bring Pirates of the Caribbean to Florida, well, it's kind of a twofold decision, Lauren. First thing they do is they create that elaborate, lengthy queue, which is all indoors because, again, it's Florida and it's either hot or it's raining. And then instead of the version in California where you're basically thrown out the door into New Orleans Square, you come up from the Pirates of the Caribbean ride and you're suddenly in the plaza, the Caribbean Plaza, that indoor store space. But that was largely, again, with the notion of, well, if it's Florida, what if it's raining? You don't want to send people straight out into the rain. Give them a moment to get orientated. And, hey, we could sell some Pirates merch in here. And speaking of which, around the same time, we had the MPC company cut a deal with Disney to do, they called them Zap action models of scenes from Pirates of the Caribbean. But I would defy you, Lauren, if you looked at any of these to recognize any scenes from the Pirates of the Caribbean. It was just sort of like, we have a lot of parts left over from earlier skeleton models. Let's just put some pirate stuff on them and sell these. But anyway, same window of time, we have the Haunted Mansion open in the original in California. Again, August of 1969. And initially, and this is what's fascinating, Lauren. Again, remember, Haunted Mansion had been something that had been discussed for Disneyland as early as 53, 54. They had actually started construction of the mansion that we know today, 61 or thereabouts, and it stood behind the gates for 6 full years. The facade, anyway, not the ride, but the facade stood there, and people just looked at it, when is that going to open? And you would think with 6 years between when the facade was built and when the attraction actually opened, somebody would have had a conversation about merch. But this was the thing. It's like, this is scary. It's like, yeah, but it's funny too. Yeah, but it's scary. We're Disney. We don't really do scary. And they're like, excuse me, have you seen the Snow White ride?
Right?
Okay,
Mr. Toad's Wild Ride?
there we go.
That's terrifying.
All right, and this isn't the merch, guys. We don't do scary. And so the merch that was prepared for the opening of the Haunted Mansion was so meager, Lauren. There was a magic book. It was actually called Disneyland's Mystifying Magic Book. And on the cover, it had an image of the Haunted Mansion, but they were so hesitant about doing merch, Haunted Mansion merch, that they deliberately designed it so it could be sold in both of the magic stores on property. Because it's like, I don't think this stuff is going to sell. And then it's like, well, what can we do that's mansion themed? So there was the Disneyland Secret Panel Chest, which is kind of a puzzle box. And then the Randotti Company, they stepped up and they made a bunch of skulls and souvenir tombstones.
Okay.
What's kind of interesting, souvenir tombstones, the idea is like it's modeled after the graves you saw as you walk through the queue coming into the mansion. So the top would say, "Here lies," and then you'd get a space where you could write in your name, and then that old ghoul of mine, or here lies the dead end kid. And the one that evidently was hugely popular because of the whole mythology of the Haunted Mansion. There are 99 happy haunts, but there's room for one more. And they actually sold a tombstone that said ghost number 1,000.
Oh, that I can see how that'd be popular.
There we go. That sold out. But the other thing, the only other thing they had was a Disneyland storyteller album. It's the story of the Haunted Mansion. And when my family went out to Disneyland, drove cross country, I bought this with my very hard-earned mowing the lawn allowance. This was my thing to take home. And I remember this vividly because, well, first of all, Ron Howard was one of the voices of the kids going into the Haunted Mansion. Yep. And this is also something that's frankly beloved by Mansion fans because there's a large section of this record storytelling album, which, by the way, has a 12-page book with illustrations that talks about the Hatbox Ghost, which I don't know if you know, Hatbox was originally only in the Haunted Mansion for cast member previews and maybe the first week of operation of the mansion.
Yes, I have heard that.
Yeah. Yep. And so they pulled him out of the attraction, and it's like, well, crap, we talk about him on the album. It's like, well, we can't change it. We printed the album to live with it. So this is part of what kept the Hatbox Ghost alive for all those years, is that there was this very vivid description of his interaction with the bride with the beating heart. And anyway, so for years, because Disney was just of two minds about, yes, I know the Haunted Mansion is very popular and people love it, but it's still scary and we don't do scary. So there was always this meager cart sitting there like 10 or 15 feet away from the crypt that you come out of when you experience the Anaheim version of the attraction. And it's interesting that we spent so much time at the front of the show talking about Haunted Mansion Holiday, because that was the inciting event. When Disney decided to do a seasonal overlay of the Haunted Mansion and incorporate characters and settings from Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, that it was literally gasoline on a bonfire. The meeting of the Tim Burton fans and the Haunted Mansion fans who just, where is the merch? We want the merch. You must get us merch now. I mean, I remember, in fact, I can see it here. There was a commemorative poem that had the entire script of Haunted Mansion Holiday done And it was one of the only pieces of merchandise for the very first season of Haunted Mansion Holiday. And I was there with Nancy and my good friend Jeff Lang and his lovely wife Flo. And we were in the park on the last day that Haunted Mansion Holiday was being presented. And they had previously run out of this scroll. But a friend who worked at the park had said, "We got some in." We then toured the entire park trying to find out where these things wound up. And we scored the last two that were in the park. Jeff got one. I got
What?
one. And I can see it here in the house. But that was on the heels of January. The Haunted Mansion Holiday runs from fall of 2001 into January of 2002. And Disney then looks at the amount of money that they made off of Haunted Mansion meets Tim Burton merch. And it's like, oh, okay. This is a business we now get in. And it happened gradually. I mean, and what was interesting, it was the folks on the East Coast who really got into it sooner, faster. In fact, once upon a time, there was actually a plan to take, you know how you sort of walk out of Florida's mansion into sort of a weird crypt space?
Yeah.
They were originally planning on digging into that hillside and creating, the idea is you entered a crypt and this was where the Haunted Mansion merch was going to be sold. And in fact, and what was especially interesting about that is that, and again, we were talking about earlier about the experimentation with technology that keeps happening in the Haunted Mansion. They were going to be doing image capture. Only the gimmick was that you were going to be able to buy a Madame Leota crystal ball. But the idea was that the footage that you could see in the Madame Leota crystal ball was of you in your doom buggy at the moment where the ghosts are messing with you
Yeah.
and that the idea you could have literally had a Madame Leota crystal ball on your desk, and if you wanted to show off to your friends, you tapped the thing and that footage would have run. And the idea was, in order to sell this thing that had been invented for the parks, they were going to have to build this elaborate new store. And sadly, when this was supposed to happen was when the financial correction happened in 2008. Disney suddenly got cautious, and by the time this idea got revisited, they took a far more cautious approach, and they actually turned the Yankee Trader, which had previously just been Liberty Square type merch, Fantasyland merch, and that's when that became Memento Mori. That opened at the Magic Kingdom in October of 2014, but prior to that is sort of a step between. They had Madame Leota's gypsy cart there. But again, it was the same thing. It was a cart with limited merch. And that was successful enough that the folks at Disneyland almost reluctantly built their version of that cart. But this is for me, the weirdest part of the story, that it took Disneyland, and think about this, Haunted Mansion Holiday, the very first edition, December of 2001, it's white hot. It takes them over 2 decades to finally build a store in that queue space, or the post show of the Haunted Mansion in Anaheim. That again, I won't lie to you, Laura. They will sell a lot of merch over 9 months out of the year that's Haunted Mansion themed, but you do not want to be in that store from October through January of 2025 when the new Haunted Mansion holiday merch comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's when this store will make, I've been told, 78 to 80% of the Haunted Mansion themed merch that sells with direct ties to Haunted Mansion Holiday.
Wow. Wow. Well, that is certainly interesting. And I've never thought about it, did not know how limited the Haunted Mansion merch actually was. So I'm happy to see the new edition, happy to see all the cool things coming for the 70th anniversary. And my dad was there at the parks like close to opening, and he did say that he'd be open to going back this year. So we were just talking before the show, and maybe, taking him out again. He hasn't been there since he was probably, 4 or 5 years old.
That would be so cool. In fact, it's interesting you mentioned this because BioReconstruct just recently reached out to both Len and I and was suggesting that what might be interesting, for example, was to seek out the areas in the Magic Kingdom that are still the same way they were back in 1971. And there's only a few areas in the park that really are still the same. Like, for example, what is it? The Pinocchio House restaurant where you look down on Small World. I mean, that's basically the same. In fact, the pizza tastes like it's been there since 71.
Yes, it does.
But I'd love to hear about you going back with your dad and what he remembers of the park back in the day. Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know. We'll get him on a plane maybe and see if we can get him to California. But on that note, I do think it's time we close up shop for today. As always, if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening across the Jim Home Media Podcast Network, just make sure you're following along on social media, Facebook, Instagram, X. That's where you're going to find the latest updates and news from all of the shows on the network. And while you're at it, please consider leaving us a review. It really helps to support the show and means a lot to us.
Absolutely. And don't forget, if you've got questions or suggestions for future episodes, we would love to hear from you. So you can reach out to us on social media or email us at, well, in my case, Jim at Jim Hill Media. In the case of Lauren, that would be Lauren at LaurenHersey.com.
All right. I think that does it for today's show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on I Want That Too.